Well, bird's a word. Well, bird, well, bird's a word. Well, bird's a word. Well, don't you know about the bird? Well, everybody knows that the bird's a word. Well, bird's a word. Hi there, folks. This is Pee Wee Herman. And would you like to come into my playhouse? Ha! Yeah, well, we got a great, exciting movie review we're going to do today, boys and girls. Because we're going to be looking back at the 1985 movie, Pee Wee's Playhouse. Okay, well, Pee Wee's Playhouse is an adventure comedy. It is directed by Tim Burton, and the script was done by Paul Reubens, Phil Hartman, and Michael Varhol. It is produced by Robert Shapiro, William McEwen, and Richard Gilbert Abramson. It is also composed by Danny Elfman, and the cinematography by Victor J. Kemper, and it was edited by Bill Weber. And the stars of the movie is Paul Reubens as me, Pee Wee Herman. Okay, well, rounding out the rest of the cast, we have Elizabeth Daly, Mark Holton. It's not for sale, Francis. After all, it's my own bike. And it's not going to be on sale, not even for $1 million, billion, trillion dollars. All right, also joining out the cast, we have is Diane Salinger, Judd Omen, Monte Landis, Daryl Roach, Starletta DuPois, Professor Toru Tanaka, longtime professional wrestler, Ed Herlihy, Ralph Seymour, Lou Cattell, Erica Yon, Alice Nunn, who had a great role in this movie as Large Marge in this movie. Let's see, John Harris, Carmen Philby, Jan Hooks, Luis Contreras, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark herself, Cassandra Peterson, Jason Hervey. You may have probably remembered him as Wayne Arnold on The Wonder Years. You know, what would you do if I sang? Okay. We had John Paragon, Lynn Stewart, Phil Hartman, who a year later, would star in the 1986 TV children's series Pee Wee's Playhouse, which would run from 1986 to 1990. We also had Michael Varhol, Patrick Cranshaw, Sunshine Parker. We had cameo appearances from Marcus Welby himself, James Brolin, Morgan Fairchild, Tony Bill, and the hair metal band Twisted Sister. So let's take a look here and see what my perspective is of this movie. Of course, it was almost 2 years ago that we lost Paul Reubens, but over the years too, we've also lost a few other cast members, including the aforementioned John Paragon, who also was in Pee Wee's Playhouse. I believe his roots also started around the same time as when Pee Wee Herman was developed back in the late 70s, when they were a member of an elite group called the Groundlings. Paragon played the character of the genie who lived in a box. He had a green face. Mr. Makalekahai Ho, what was his name? Zombie, that was his name. He also voiced the character of Terry Dactyl, a pterodactyl, who ironically was named Terry. We also had Phil Hartman, who would be an iconic alum, a longtime alum from the TV series sketch comedy Saturday Night Live. He also did voice acting. I don't think this guy really needs too much introduction. He was a great comedian, great voice actor, entrepreneur, music producer too. He wrote the script for Pee Wee's Big Adventure himself. Phil Hartman, of course, unfortunately, his career, his life in particular ended in great tragedy. Sadly, we lost him in 1998. And not too long ago, Lynn Stewart, or Lynn Marie Stewart, who played the most beautiful woman in Puppet Land. I'm talking Miss Yvonne. Unfortunately, she too also had passed away earlier this year. There's been other cast members too who are not with us anymore, but these three actors here that we've mentioned before are not with us anymore. They left a landmark and a legacy on us, the show, and they're going to be sadly missed. So not only did we get the Pee Wee Herman character noticed by millions in his big screen debut, it's not his debut though. I mean, Pee Wee Herman's roots date back to the Groundlings back in the 1970s. He also had an HBO show, which was kind of like a stage comedy show called The Pee Wee Herman Show. And yes, I got something I want to show you guys. See right over here, we have a Pee Wee Herman T-shirt, Pee Wee's Big Adventure. There he is on his prized prop, which was his beloved bike, which we will get to in a bit. This not only was where Pee Wee Herman started to get a lot more worldwide notice, this was also the big picture debut for one of the great iconic directors of our times, the legendary Tim Burton, who would go on to direct all kinds of other like deep-rooted, almost gothic type stuff. And of course, he directed two Batman franchises, the two of them, including both of them which starred Michael Keaton, Batman, and then in 1992, Batman Returns. It also was the big screen soundtrack debut for Danny Elfman. Prior to that, he was a member of an 80s group called Oingo Boingo. Too shy, 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 shy do I. I won't go too much into that, but yes, Danny Elfman. Hey, they all had to start at humble roots at one point or another, right? Therefore, Pee-wee's Big Adventure was truly a milestone for these three who went on to big things in their career as years go by. Of course, Pee Wee Herman also left an unfortunate mark around early 1991. I don't want to go into too much details of that, but if you're going to go into an adult theater, at least keep your hands to yourself and keep your pants zipper up. Let's just put it into that perspective. I'm trying to make this as G as possible because this is during the day, and this is probably my only chance I'll ever get to do a day review. Anyways, yeah. Though Pee Wee Herman was portrayed as an adult, his approach and mannerisms might tell you another story. He acts very much like a child. In fact, in the movie itself, he's got his whole house is like a small little single home bungalow, but it's filled with kids' toys. It's like he never really ever left adulthood. He was practically a 10-year-old trapped in a 30-year-old man's body. His approach and mannerisms were pretty much child, even though I think he probably might have some knowledge in engineering, because in the early scenes when he wakes up wearing his onesie pajamas, he goes out and makes breakfast, and his breakfast seems to come into be made by some kind of clever, kind of Ruby Goldberg-like contraptions, and everything just comes out perfectly. Oh, and he's also eating sugary cereal like Mr. T cereal. Hey, does anybody ever remember Mr. T cereal? Because if you don't, pity the fool who don't remember Mr. T cereal, brother. Can you get it? It seems to have he seems to kind of have this childlike innocence that we have grown to love and admired over the years, and this shtick never grows old or stale. So, in his big screen debut, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Pee-wee's favorite possession. Now, he's got, of course, a whole room. His whole house is surrounded by toys, gadgets, and all kinds of really cool stuff. But, of course, his prized possession is his bike. Yes. It means more to him than life itself. It's got cool gadgets and stuff decorated all over it. And, of course, in this movie, there's going to likely be a conflict because a story can't go on, become a story unless there's a conflict, unless there's a struggle. And because it's Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Pee-wee's going on an adventure. Hence the title, huh? Right. So, in this story, we also are met with another man-child. His name is Francis, played by Mark Holton, who I remember from the Leprechaun movie, the first one. He was a painter by the name of Ozzy, who's kind of also a bit man-child. At least he kind of plays a little bit more sympathetic. This one here, he's just a spoiled, bratty kid, rich kid, who seems to get whatever he wants. So his birthday is coming up, and he could get whatever he wants. Maybe even a new brain. But no, he wants Pee-wee's prized bike. But Pee-wee refuses to give him the bike. Not even for $1,000,000,000,000, Francis. And his father makes him an offer and drives off with it. But he refuses. He refuses because it's not for sale, Francis. So when he comes out of the bike shop, it's stolen. So now Pee-wee is making it his own mission to go out on the road to look for it. Even if it means going to San Antonio, Texas at the Alamo to find it. He will go to great lengths necessary to get back his bike. Even if it is to go out into a Hollywood lot where eventually his bike was found by another spoiled. This time it's not a man-child, but just a spoiled child actor played by Jason Hervey, who would go on to play Kevin Arnold's asshole older brother, Wayne. Sorry, I know this is a PG movie and I should not have sworn, but I promise you from here on out I won't throw any more curse words. Only the darker movies I'll do that, but it just came out. I'm so sorry about that. Much to the frustrations of bike shop employee Dottie, played by E.G. Daly or Elizabeth Daly, who we all know as the voice of Tommy Pickles from the Rugrats. She seems to have a crush on Pee-wee. He stops at nothing to get it back. Of course, Pee-wee, he says he's a rebel. He's a loner. He's a lone wolf. He's not going to get any kind of relationship. Now, that's not to say, if anything, if you think that Pee-wee Herman might be gay, well, no. Maybe he's just man-child asexual. That's what I like to think of him. So when he goes to a fortune teller, played by Erica Yawn, she tells him that his bike is situated in a basement located at the Alamo in San Antonio, Texas. There's a problem, though. There is no basement at the Alamo. No, there's no basement in the Alamo. And just like a typical road movie, you meet some unusual people and you get yourself into a lot of unpredictable antics, like the average typical road movie. He meets a barrage of unique characters along the way. This includes a dangerous criminal who did the most evil, devious, most despicable, heinous act ever committed in the history of crime. You know what he did? All he did was cut price tags off mattresses. Yeah. Yeah, you rip a label off a mattress, you're going to go to jail for a substantial period of time. We meet a mysterious entity truck driver who goes by the name of Large Marge, played by Alice Nunn. Whew. That's probably like one of the most memorable scenes in Pee-wee's Playhouse, and maybe the catalyst for a lot more of the more darker themed stuff that Tim Burton would produce later on, including Edward Scissorhands, the Batman movies, Sleepy Hollow, Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, amongst many others. He befriends a kind-hearted waitress named Simone, played by Diane Salinger, who's got ambitions to go to France. However, her jealous giant of a boyfriend named Andy, played by John Harris, who was famous for playing a professional wrestler by the name of Silo Sam. Yeah, did everybody remember Silo Sam? Well, that's for another story. Anyhow, this guy, he was portrayed as another one of these big, giant country bumpkins. But except for this kind of movie partner, he's not being the big, lovable, simple-minded hillbilly yokel. No, he won't let her go, and he also gives chase to Pee-wee. Pee-wee eventually meets a lot of other people, including a rambunctious motorcycle gang. And to prevent himself from getting beat up by these biker dudes, he ends up putting on a pair of weird shoes and doing tequila. By the time he gets to the Alamo, he gets humiliated by the tour guide when asked about the basement. Because there was no basement. So then, after getting hurt and awakened in the hospital, there's also a pretty scary scene where he's being checked on by not doctors and nurses, but clowns. And they're pretty demented clowns. They're not juggling oranges or making balloon animals. No, they're ready to do icky things to Pee-wee. So then he ends up in Hollywood and is being used as a prop for a movie. Eventually he gets his bike back, and his adventures get turned into a movie, albeit with a bit of a James Bond spin, and has a cameo appearance from James Brolin, playing the Pee-wee part with a more suave and mature demeanor. And we get plenty of cameos, especially from legendary comedian Mr. Television himself, Milton Berle. We have, of course, Phil Hartman, future teen star Jason Hervey. We also have glam rock legends Twisted Sister. We're not gonna take it. No, we ain't gonna take it. And, of course, the blonde bombshell herself, Morgan Fairchild. So we got this whole ensemble of characters in this, and yeah. This movie was released and it turned into a smashing success, and it definitely made the stars out of both Tim Burton, who turned Pee-wee into a mega superstar. Burton would, of course, become as successful as a director in such films as Edward Scissorhands, Batman, Batman Returns, Ed Wood, Sleepy Hollow, Coraline, Sweeney Todd, and many, many, many others. I mean, if you want to know about the king of goth directed theme movies, you gotta turn to Mr. Burton. While Reubens' character, Pee Wee Herman, would have a home on CBS Saturday mornings with Pee Wee's Playhouse. He also had another movie that came out in '87, which was not too successful. He also appeared in Back to the Beach, which was one of the last surfer type movies, which starred two great icons, including Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello. Yeah, because he was doing the surfer bird like what I just did earlier. You know, he, but then controversy, allegations, and arrests had also affected him. He would eventually be kind of like not in complete obscurity, but not as high prolific. Yeah, he appeared in Batman Returns as Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin's father. Who, yeah, he was also in Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie with Christy Swanson. He appeared as the Spleen in Mystery Men. He was the real star in that. Uh, Pee Wee's Big Holiday came out in 2011, so he eventually tried to redeem himself after many years of being put in obscurity. And unfortunately, sadly, on July 23rd, 2023, Paul Reubens eventually died at the age of 70 years old from cancer. He will be sadly missed. And there's nobody ever going to be like Pee Wee Herman. Not Jim Parsons. Not me. I'm just dressed in as him because I'm doing this review. And of course, whenever I do a movie review, I will now be in cosplay. So be prepared for some more upcoming fun surprises in other future shows. But for now, rest in peace, Pee Wee Herman. Um, you brought a lot of joy to millions of others, even though you were one of the earlier victims of cancel culture. But let's not judge others for what they do. Let's all forgive and forget, can we? Some people deserve forgiveness, others don't. The rating for this movie back in the day had been relatively through in later years. That bravado has kind of taken a subtle decline. The teen to young adult ratio loved it with a 7.5 approval rating. The adults loved it less with a 6.6 approval rating. But then again, Pee Wee was more catered towards the younger age demographic. So, whatever the case, one thing is absolutely certain: no one will ever say that they were ever bored with this movie. Yeah, it's kind of formulaic because it's a road trip movie, and I kind of get that. A lot of road trip movies seem to have that kind of similar trope. You go around, you meet a bunch of weird people or unusual individuals. You go through these conflicts, you go through these struggles. Just and it just kind of goes through that. Sesame Street's Follow That Bird had that road trip type of thing going for them. These kind of things. It's meant for family. It's meant for family viewing, and that's kind of like who Pee Wee Herman was. He was more for a family content creation. And even though Reubens gave Pee Wee Herman more recognition than even he himself had before, he was already famous on cable television with specials on HBO, and he also made regular appearances on shows like with David Letterman, Joan Rivers, Johnny Carson, amongst many, many others. He would also make other movies like Big Top Pee Wee and others, but they didn't kind of live up to the hype, and his career was dormant due to accusations of rather unflattering situations. I won't get into it. I'm trying to keep this one a little more PG, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. you want to read more about it, just go look it up somewhere, and I will just stay my ground right here where I am. That's and along with friends. To me, a Saturday morning show outperformed even his movie debut, mostly because on his program, his character, we see him being more developed, and we could see more of who his character is and how he interacts with the unique, strange people and the creatures that inhabit his playhouse. Now, of course, we all know that back in the 80s and early 90s, Pee-wee's Playhouse, many people thought of it as being just a dumb formulaic show where he just practically screams the whole way through. But, throughout his episodes, there was always like lessons to be learned, moral lessons about how to be a good, upstanding individual. He tried to shoehorn that kind of stuff without being preachy or without being sentimental. And I think that's kind of like why I believe his show was very underrated. He can relate to kids more than adults because he's literally a kid trapped in the body of an adult. And you know what? That's fine. We can all be kids even as we grow older as we go along. And you can pretend to still have a kid in heart in you, and you don't have to necessarily be immature about it. Okay, you don't have to glue the teacher's chair or your boss's chair or stick thumbtacks in people's shoes or anything like that. No, come on. You could be a kid at heart. You just don't have to be a punk or a delinquent or an asshole. People just seem to naturally just like this individual. Even the adults too. Hey, he lived in both worlds. Even the less than nicer characters seem to have some level of fondness for him. I mean, even though he is the main villain in his character, even Francis starts to kind of soften up to him, knowing that if word comes out that he was the one solely responsible for stealing Pee Wee's bike, even he started to have second thoughts that maybe I should not, that maybe I might have stepped over the line. Dottie, played by E.G. Daly, always seemed to have a liking to him, in spite the fact of just by his outmost appearance, which isn't like conventionally attractive. I mean, if he was living in the real world, Pee Wee Herman would probably be looked upon as somebody you would not want to build a solid love relationship. Maybe a like, but not a love. Sure, he's a lovable guy. And maybe that's what probably finds her attracted to him. But he acts more like a child than an adult. And maybe that might be okay for a bit, but it might eventually just fade out. There's nothing of pure romance if you see a guy who lives more like a kid than an adult. He dresses like a cartoon character and talks with a weird, nerdy, nasally voice that most people would be turned off in the real world. But he loves him just the way he is, and maybe this might be just, and maybe that might be cool in many, many ways. So, when all is said and done, I really actually like this movie. He really, really, he really brought life into this character, and yeah, he's gonna be missed. Nobody could ever replace him, and that's the reason why I'm dressed like this. Ha! So until next time, I'd like to thank you all for. So I guess this kind of ends my writer review, or my Pee Wee movie review. You know, if I do big time Pee Wee, I'll put on the Pee Wee costume again. So there you go. This ends my ride review. I want to thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. Yeah. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Pee Wee Herman saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye!